Hello everybody, today on Reviewed as Food we're going to be looking at one of the most disappointing great games I've played in a while, Katana Zero. At the base of all cooking we have prep work that needs to be done, and similarly games always have gameplay to discuss. So allow me to take on this mountain of onions while we dig into the aforementioned gameplay of Katana Zero. The game has you take hold of an assassin who has the common ability of a melee attack that you can use in order to dispose of enemies quickly. The slash is very quick but comes with notable end lag. It's significant since the game doesn't deal with health in the same way that has become traditional, with the player and foes having health bars that get whittled down. Rather, everything dies in one hit, which makes every bit of end lag very important. Both in terms of the player not getting to freely slash through all the enemies, but also because it gives them a window of opportunity in dealing with you. You see, they show up in two main variations, these being melee and ranged. The most common way of dealing with these types is to slash the melee ones and parrying the bullets back at the attackers. They are pretty straightforward in how they function, but when they become layered like the onions that we're getting through, they start showing higher levels of depth. A common situation that you're going to run into is melee enemies running up to you with shooters as backup, and because of the aforementioned end lag, you can easily get baited into using your slash on the ones that are closest to you, only to get hit by a bullet moments later. These types of small interactions is what Katana Zero thrives on, and it transforms the encounters into much more than what they would have been otherwise. As an example of that, you can think about the onions that we've been working on. Nobody is going to tell you that a raw onion is particularly tasty, but given the time and care you can caramelize it into new heights, giving it a more appealing look as well as taste. You're given tools like jumping, wall jumping, rolling, and throwing items that you can find in the levels, and each of the enemy types are weak to a specific tool that you have, but they all fall in line with the same philosophy of covering each other's weaknesses. And considering the amount of variety that the game has to offer, this really goes a long way in keeping each encounter interesting throughout the entire game. As you've probably been able to tell by now, Katana Zero runs at a really high pace, but in order to offset that a bit into the player's favor, you also have the ability to slow down time. This ability is limited by the meter that's at the top left of the screen. Running out of meter when you really need it can sometimes lead to pretty hilarious results, but what I find most interesting about it is the fact that it charged over time rather than being a set amount per room. Essentially, this becomes a way for the player to self-regulate the difficulty, as you can choose to take things slow in order to get things to run even slower if you end up running into difficulties. But even so, the slowdown has a secondary long-term effect that shouldn't be underestimated. Since the game runs at such a high pace, it would require a ton of trial and error in order to get a grasp of the enemies and their behaviors. But because of the slowdown, you get time to observe them in situations where you otherwise might have blinked. At this point, I feel like I've made it pretty clear that I really like the core of the game, but it gets even stronger due to the game's level design. Apart from the placement of the enemies, the levels often have multiple avenues of attack, meaning you can choose the approach that fits you best. Whether that's a head-on assault or a more tactical way of handling the engagements, by the way of creating chaos and picking up individuals without them getting a grasp of where you are. Not to mention how often you get put into levels that are completely unique to the standard approach to levels within the game. And all of this gets supported by the art as well. Each environment in the game looks very different from the others and lends itself well to get a good sense of progression throughout. This translates to enemies of different types as well. They look very different and you'll easily be able to tell one type of melee enemy from another. Granted, the speed of the game will often keep you from realizing that there's a new threat, but you'll be able to tell what's what after an encounter. While the colorful palette could easily fool you into thinking that this is a very happy-go-lucky world, the way they've set up each area evokes a certain level of uneasiness. It's a similar effect to what I'd get from watching the movie Fight Club, where the colors and general setup of each environment makes you a bit queasy as you get the feeling of being unsafe there. This gets further built upon by the world building and story. The game takes place in a fictional world where things have gone real bad. After a war that seems to have gone far beyond the limits of the Geneva Conventions, there's little left in terms of happiness in the city that the game takes place in. This is reflected in the characters that you will come across throughout the game, as each of them have a tough exterior that is shown in the way they interact with one another. But even so, there are bits that cut through the darkness to bring you some heartwarming moments. The story was surprisingly engaging, as each new revelation about the world dragged my interest further into it, and that ended up being more important than I originally anticipated. It turns out that the story is a very big part of the experience as a whole. Going in, I was expecting it to be very focused on the main loop of clearing rooms, but the game had almost a 50-50 split between the gameplay and story, with each gameplay section being sandwiched between story beats. So all in all, I would describe Katana Zero as an onion soup appetizer. Every part of the game was so well done, and just like the soup, it's a joy to get into it. But because of the story, I got really hungry for more. I was expecting a full-on meal, but the game was over in about 4 hours, which left me feeling empty and wanting more. Just like the soup, everything about the game was on point, and each spoonful makes you feel like you're spoiling yourself just a bit. I can't overstate how highly I think of a game if the main criticism of it is that I wish there was more, but it nevertheless left me disappointed and wanting more. So if you've been thinking about playing the game, I'd probably recommend to wait for there to be more before going into it, in order to avoid withdrawal symptoms. But if you want to give it a shot right away, know that you're going in for a great ride, and maybe the end of the game won't hit you as hard as it did me, with you knowing what size bowl you're getting into. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. As always, if you think there's something that I could have done better, then please let me know in the comments. Thank you. Have a great day.